Another application would be a replacement. If you're replacing a pump on it's an existing pump, existing irrigation system, and the pump has failed for some reason and you need to replace that. The first things you need to find out is, why did that pump fail? A couple of reasons. Could have failed because of age, could have failed because of a design error when it was originally installed and designed. If the pump's 15 years old and is functioned fine up until the point where it failed, then chances are the design is perfect. The pump is old, it just failed because of age. Get the model number, and make and model number of that pump so that you can look up a curve and match the curve to whatever particular pump you're trying to match. Chances are they'll come pretty close. There's a tag on the pump itself. This particular pump, the tag is right here. It gives you a model number on there. That model number is going to correlate to a number in a book that will have that pump curve tell you the specifics of what that pump will do at any given pressure. If it's a pressure tank design and it's strictly an irrigation pump, it's not very common, but I have seen it. If the system is not moving as much water as the pump has got the ability to move, you're back into a situation where you can cycle that pump, and cycling the pump on and off is again a premature failure, and we'll try to avoid that. If that pressure tank is strictly for the irrigation system, it can be abandoned. You may have to upgrade the controller to a irrigation controller that's got a pump start or a master valve option on it. That may be the only reason that there's a pressure tank on it, is because the existing controller does not have that option. Could save a lot of future money. Another failure could be an installation failure. If the pump is installed in an enclosure that it doesn't have the air circulation around it to keep it cool, you're going to overheat the pump, it's going to get hot, and again have a failure that is way too early. These pumps should be installed in an enclosure that protects them from the elements but still allows air movement around them, cycling from one end to the other, so that you can keep the motor cool on them, especially if it's a pump that's being used for domestic purposes, where it's going to be cycled on and off a little more often than it is on an irrigation purpose. If the pump failed due to a design error, the irrigation design needs to be looked at, or the irrigation system needs to be looked at, and get a total flow per zone. Again, hopefully they are fairly consistent. And then you also need to figure out what heads are on the system so you can design around the ideal pressure for those heads to be functioning. And then size your pump from there. Now, if you're in a situation where you've got some zones that are running at 20 gallons a minute and some zones that are running at 10 gallons a minute, you got a situation where it's going to be tough to size a pump for it because you've got such a dramatic difference in the zone sizes. A couple of options. Tie two zones together, run two zones at one time. If the system hydraulically can handle that, as far as pipe sizing and pipe diameters, that's one option. Another option is to add to that zone. Is there someplace else on this property that can be irrigated or needs to be irrigated that we can add some more water to these smaller zones? Third option would be something like a cycle stop valve. The drawback to cycle stop valves is they are going to add cost to the system. It is a good option if that's the only option, because you're back into a situation where you're going to be going through pumps every 2 years. Then yeah, cycle stop valve is going to be by far the best option. You may have adequate water to run an irrigation system, but all of a sudden your dynamic pressure is not enough to make the heads function the way that they need to function. So then you're looking at boosting that pressure to make the irrigation system run the way it should. The first thing you need to find is your dynamic pressure, which is with water in motion. If you've got 10 gallons a minute available to use and your pressure while moving 10 gallons a minute is 20 psi, that's not enough to make most heads function the way they should function. You need to determine what your ideal pressure is for those sprinkler heads. We'll say that that's 60 psi. You also need to figure in what you've got for friction loss and elevation difference. Friction loss is the pressure that you lose getting from point A to point B. We'll say that our friction loss and elevation difference is going to result in a 10-pound loss. So now we're looking at 70 pounds, but you've already got 20 pounds coming in, so we're going to take that away, and we end up with a pump that we need to be able to produce 50 psi out of at this 10 gallons a minute. A booster pump in general is specific to boosting pressure. It's not going to increase your flow any. The reason you're putting it in there is to make that pump or make that irrigation system function the way it should function, so you need to bump the pressure up on it. One thing that's really critical on here is that you take into account your friction loss in the pipe. Now there's friction loss charts in multiple different locations. Almost any tech guide on irrigation or pump catalog has got a friction loss chart in it. And what it does is it tells you how much pressure you lose in any given number of feet, normally 100 feet, at a specific flow. And that's something that definitely needs to be taken into account, because if you were to figure this without adding that 10 psi difference in there, now all of a sudden you've got a pump that's you're gonna size for 40 pounds, and instead of running at 60 pounds, they're gonna be running at 50 pounds. A lot of heads, it's not gonna make that big of a difference, but in some designs, it's gonna make a huge difference.